other in an emergency. This particular agreement allows us to provide each other with emergency drinking water during periods of loss of water pressure in either Burlington or Billerica. This is a 25-year agreement and has been reviewed by Town Council.
Thank you.
John's here if we have any questions.
Mr. Sanchez. Gentlemen, any questions on this?
No,
We're all
good.
ready to back up? Everything's good? Okay, at that point, Mr. Sanchez, would you like to go over anything, or would you just like to take a vote on it?
There's nothing other than both town councils from Billerica and Burlington have reviewed the agreements, and Billerica already voted on it last week and approved this.
So if everyone's all set, motion?
Nick, do you want to do that?
Yeah, I can make the motion.
Yeah, the suggested motion, yeah.
Oh, is there a suggestion?
Yeah.
My apologies. There it is. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 25-year Billerica-Burlington intermunicipal agreement for the purpose of allowing the use of emergency water connections between the towns to provide water during periods of loss of water pressure in either of the town systems.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, against, 5-0-0, Betty.
Thank
Mr.
you very
Sanchez,
much.
Thank you. Great job tonight. Appreciate it.
Good.
Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up, we have a project that the board previously reviewed and voted a letter of support for. This next vote will allow the project to be submitted to the state for review and approval to move forward. The town's housing coordinator has reviewed the application and prepared a memorandum of understanding with several recommendations for the project that we believe will have a positive impact on it as it works its way through the town and state approval process. Thus, we are asking for a vote to approve, subject to the successful execution of a memorandum of understanding.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we all get the backup on this. Any questions about it? Anything you'd like to go over? We've already discussed this before.
Do we need to read these out loud for the public to see? I mean, we all know what they are.
I think that's something that they can come and look. There's a lot there to read. It's like 4 pages. Be here another 3 weeks.
Well, I wasn't going to read all
It's
4
all,
pages.
it's all public knowledge, right?
Yeah, it's in the packet, so.
So,
I signed where Billerica is.
at that point, well, what's that, Michael?
You had a moment.
I signed under the wrong town.
You could be chairman tonight. You could be
Just
chairman
voted the whole
tonight.
document.
Billerica, Billerica. I signed where it says Billerica Selectmen.
Oh, it could be that too. So at that point, you want to make a motion on this?
I make a motion that we approve with the conditions and depending on the negotiation of the MOA to approve the Windview Heights request.
A motion made by Bob, second by
Second.
Jimmy. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0-0, Betty.
Thank you.
284, Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up, we have a public hearing. If we can ask a member to read the notice into the record.
You have to
Mr.
ask
Priest?
a member, like, just ask me, it's fine.
Remember what he
Established
did?
at this point that I'm just reading all of these. Please be advised the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, January 13th, 2020, at or after 6:30 p.m. in the main town hall meeting room, 29 Center Street, second floor, Burlington, Massachusetts, to consider a request for approval from Eversource as being presented by the N-Star Electric Company, doing business as Eversource Energy, for the purpose of obtaining a grant of location to install 75 plus or minus feet of conduit in Dearborn Road for the purpose of providing underground electrical service for a vehicle charging station at the main Burlington Town Hall's parking lot, 29 Center Street.
Gentlemen, any questions on this? See that being done, do I have a motion?
Now, hold on.
Hold on, ask for the public.
No, I'm Karen.
Would anybody from the public like to speak about this?
I'm sorry, say that again, sir?
I was asking the public, open public hearing on this first, and then we'll go from there. I know what they're all here for, so that's why I was skipping over it.
Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing?
I can't second it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0-0. Yes, go right ahead.
I'm here on behalf of Eversource Energy to request a grant of location to install conduit in Dearborn Road for the electric vehicle charging station for 29 Center Street.
And you got it.
Fantastic. Okay.
It's all done.
Thank you.
That's it.
You just wasted a night, huh?
It was an interesting evening.
Thank you. Want to stick around for the rest
Gets
of it?
more interesting.
It's gonna get better.
I'm sure it's coming. Thank you very much.
So I need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion to grant the location to Dearborn Road to Eversource for the EV charging stations for Town Hall.
Motion made by Nick, second by
Second.
Jimmy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
500, Betty. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay. 285, Mr. Sagarino.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, is Treasure Collector Search Committee. This represents the next step in the town's transition to an appointed treasurer collector, and that would be to appoint a search committee for the position, and also to engage the services of an auditor to review the office. Historically, we have included relevant financial department heads to assist us with recruiting for financial positions. For discussion purposes, for the board's consideration, I would at least start it off with a recommendation for the following committee for the board. A Selectmen, a Ways and Means member chosen by the Chair of Ways and Means, Assistant Town Administrator John Denizio, Town Assessor Jim Doherty, current Treasurer Collector Brian Curtin, myself, and HR Director Joanne Faust. So we're open to suggestions on what you folks would like to have on the committee, but that's a starting point for our discussions.
Save my comments till the end. Gentlemen, anything?
Well, that's a list that works for me. They're going to bring a 2 or 3 recommendations to us, and then we'll be making the final decision, or?
That's correct.
Jim?
I'll go with it.
Michael?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good number. Again, as in the other appointments, we'll get the committee narrow it down to a handful for us to consider. So, yeah, I'm fine with that number, Paul.
Mr. Priest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's definitely the right cut of people, I think, in terms of who you're pulling from. I like that, we can have someone from Ways and Means, and we have all necessary voices. I assume that Joanne's going to conduct this similar to how she conducted the economic development.
Yes, that's how
Okay.
she does all of them, so
Okay, great.
very similar.
Then that's excellent. No more questions. Thank you.
So we need a vote on this, right?
Yes, please.
This is a public?
No.
That's not a public hearing,
Not a public hearing. So.
unless you want to hear from somebody.
What's that?
Unless you want to hear from somebody.
Would you like to speak on this?
Thank you for recognizing me. Sherry Ellis, town meeting member. I just was questioning that town meeting was the group, the body that kind of started this ball rolling. Could a town meeting member be a representative on that search committee?
Okay.
Just a thought.
All right, thank you. We'll look into that, right?
Well, your Ways and Means.
The Ways and Means, right?
Yeah, that's town meeting member.
That's a town meeting member?
Not necessarily.
Not always.
It's a plan.
Well, we can request them to put a town meeting member in there, right?
Ways and Means member who is a town meeting member? Is that the suggestion?
Sure, that's even better.
All right? Okay. We vote?
Sure. I'll make the motion that we approve the list as presented by Town Administrator Sagarino, with the inclusion that one of the Ways and Means members should also be a town meeting member.
Motion made,
Second.
second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against, opposed, 500, Betty. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several years ago, the board was approached with the idea of licensing town-owned land in the right-of-way for use for signage for the new development at 154, 160 Cambridge Street, which we now know as Shops at Simon's. The town developed an RFP for the purposes of licensing this land, setting out a proposed fee schedule and all the other legalities associated with such an endeavor. We received one response to the RFP, and as a result of that, the law allows the town to negotiate with that respondent, which was Heritage Trail LLC of Waltham. The board has a draft license agreement in the packet, which has been reviewed by town council, but just as a note, there might be a few minor items that will require tweaking, but all the important aspects have been resolved. I would also like to acknowledge that we've received correspondence from various boards and individuals that have all been forwarded along to you along the way, and I think we summarized them in a full package that we sent out to everybody again this morning, Betty. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. At this point, gentlemen, do you want to add anything to this? I know this isn't a public hearing. I know this, the two proponents are down back. Do you have well, I'm sure there's a couple of questions that the board would like to ask you guys. Just introduce yourself for the rest of the community.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Attorney Mark Vaughn with Reaman Bronstein here tonight representing Heritage Trail, Duffy property, the owner of the former Building 19 property and the one that did submit the response under the RFP. Kevin.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kevin Duffy.
Thank you. So, gentlemen, you've all read the proposal, I'm assuming. You've all updated yourself on what's going on. Do we have questions tonight about the sign, about what's going on? I know myself and Mike have sat and asked a bunch of questions, but I heard some rumbling prior to the meeting and just want to get it all out on the table before we have a vote on this.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I understand the importance of having signage so people know what stores are in that location. But I'm concerned about the location of it and the obstruction of the pole for the traffic lights. If you're driving north, heading towards the traffic lights, based on where I'm perceived it's going to be, it just seems like it's just a difficult location for people to have to start looking around the pole. And it just bothers me if that's the only location. I know that's the only location, but I just have some concerns about that location, having taken pictures from the driver's view driving north on Cambridge Street, approaching the traffic light. You know, I want to make sure that it's not too big. I also agree with comments from the Board of Appeals, even though they don't have any legal tender in this conversation, about maybe even having a discussion about if the stores on the street are going to have signs on the street, do they also need to be on that signage? Should it be just for the stores in the back that people can't see from the street? Just some thoughts.
If I could, maybe I could address the second one first and then defer to Mr. Duffy for the question about the site distance issue. But with respect to the sign, is obviously, as the board knows, we were here back, I can't believe it's been that, August of 2017 to, discuss this with the board at that time. But for the reasons we'd indicated then, primarily the rear building is the one that is going to be pretty much totally blocked from view, just given the juxtaposition of the buildings and the fact that you have the bank buildings as you're approaching from what would be the south. So the feeling from the beginning, and I think Kevin has maintained, he's been pretty consistent with this throughout the whole redevelopment process, is that it is critical to be able to have appropriate visibility for those tenants that would not otherwise have any visibility whatsoever. With respect to the building out front, I think if you've driven coming from, again, from the south, from 128 heading north, even that building out front, because it sits so close to Cambridge Street, you would not be in a position to see any signage on that building if you're approaching from the south and before you have to turn into the one entrance drive. We do feel that having the ability for those tenants out front as well to perhaps have some visibility on that is important. At the end of the day, you know, I think it's a matter of every tenant that Kevin and his family have talked to have expressed interest in making sure they have that ability to have signage out there. But just as important, I think it's a traffic safety issue. I think signage quite often comes down to traffic safety and wanting to be able to prompt and give sufficient warning to motorists if they're on a busy road like that. I think, you know, that section of Cambridge Street can be, you know, pretty busy enough in terms of is it 4 lanes, 2 lanes, you know, what's going on. So I think having the flexibility to have signage for both buildings would be important. As it relates to the other instance, issue, Mr. Hogan, relative to the site distance and all that, I know that had been looked at pretty heavily by BSC Group in terms of the placement of the sign, so it doesn't block site distance. And Kevin, maybe you can elaborate on that, but I think that since it's going to be signal, that controls it as well, so that, you know, no one can come out of there and take a left without it there actually being a green light to be able to achieve it.
Good evening. We shared your concerns in terms of the placement of a sign in what's a very constrained area. As you mentioned, there's a lot going on there. Traffic signals, lanterns, site lighting, things like that. We looked at it, our sign people looked at it, and BSC all looked at it, and we positioned the sign in what we thought was the best location. I walked it heading northbound on the sidewalk. I didn't really get out on the street and walk it, and I feel confident that we've positioned the sign in the best location that we can get it in, and and maximize its visibility for people heading northbound on Route 3.
Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This might be more housekeeping than anything on this particular point, but the plan submitted says it's the residents at Simons Park on the bottom of the plan. Do I make sure we're doing this the right way?
It is the shops at Simons Park.
Right.
I can say that.
The job location, the residences have a different street address.
They have 160. Yeah, you're right. Down at the right-hand corner, it does say the residents at Simons Park, but it is the shops at Simons Park.
I'm going to ask the million-dollar question is, does it have to be this tall?
Honestly, we would like it taller. And we've looked at it, we've studied it, we've looked at a 12-footer, 14-footer, and a 16-footer. And we think we've compromised it at the 16.
14.
14.
I'm sorry, 14.
14.
12, 14, and
Originally, if I could, Mr. Tigas, it was originally 16 feet. That was what the proposal was several, 2.5 years ago when we were before you. Since that time, I know that through the town administrator, there's been a request to see if we could reduce the height. I would indicate that the 14 feet in height is from bottom to the top, in terms of the bottom of the sign, which includes the monument base, as well as the decorative feature up at the top. So the actual area that would be devoted to tenant signage itself, if you would, is about 9 feet 7 inches in height. So when you break that up into individual tenants, I think the feeling is that that's really what's necessary in order to provide adequate visibility, so, you know, people aren't squinting, they're able to actually make out who the tenant is.
I do concur with Mr. Hogan with respect to the Board of Appeals, because they do this all the time, and I actually like their comments. Absolutely, in my opinion, I don't think any logo should be out there. To me, it's about safety. Logos, I don't think, enhance safety at all, or serve a purpose with regards to safety. Wish it could be smaller. And I'll just stop it right there for now.
Mr. Priest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I try not to say, you know, what I like and don't like. I try to be as objective as humanly possible, and I fail most of the time. I feel, it is my opinion that you had ample opportunity to put this sign anywhere else on that property. The side of that building that faces 3A is well within our ZBA and sign bylaws. Several other plazas in town don't have big monument directory signs. People are very savvy with their phones. This could have been cut a lot of different ways. And so the fact that it's here in front of us just rubs me the wrong way. I would rather see this go through the ZBA. If it's gonna come to public property, I think that as a board, we should assign this to the ZBA, and that you can go through them, like every other sign, until we have an opportunity to review our sign bylaws and get them straightened out. I know that they're a bit of a thing right now. But, you know, once we as a board open that door to allowing private signs on public ways, I feel like there's no way of knowing where to stop, who to stop with, and that it's just going to make everything so much more difficult. And this is just setting aside like the general idea of like what our master plan was for the entirety of 3A, right? You know, I'm pro-business. I'm not trying to hurt the businesses that want to go in there. Mr. Parker can attest to that. You know, but I feel like there was plenty of opportunities where this could have been sussed out without having to come to us. So I'm not a huge fan. I don't know if I have any questions other than why. You know, you say it's a prime location, but to who? You know, I mean, the folks coming up 3A the other way, you know, I mean, they might see if they're stopped at the red light. But I mean, folks are going to work, you know. I don't know. I mean, I could go on with my own opinions all day long, but I won't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me try and, to the best of my recollection, quickly go through the timeline on this proposal. As Mark alluded to, we were first approached back in 2017 after the town sort of collectively breathed a sigh of relief that somebody actually purchased that property that has been an eyesore for decades in this town and who was habitually in violation of the town bylaws in regarding signage. You know that their motto was good stuff cheap, and that was evident every time you drove by there. And I think everybody in town was thrilled to find out that they actually had a buyer for that site, and we're going to redevelop it and redevelop it responsibly. It was brought to our attention that we had an orphaned piece of roadway located within the site that would benefit the success of that particular redevelopment. I thought it was advantageous, and the board unanimously agreed that if we could be helpful in seeing that redevelopment successful, that we should pursue that, and we did just that with the appointment of a subcommittee. We were instructed by then Chairman Hartling, the subcommittee, to seek out advice from other boards in town who were more familiar with this type of issues, as we don't handle them on a regular basis, if at all. We had many discussions with a lot of give and take, back and forth, paying particular attention to dimensions and lighting and building materials for this sign. We came back to this board with a proposal, identifying the compromises that we made. You all saw the construction materials that were going to be used. We spoke at length about lighting and so forth. We were asked to then go back and negotiate, after issuing an RFP, to negotiate a lease, and which we did. And the applicant has agreed to pay us during the term of this lease some $436,000 for the use of that roughly 300 square foot piece of public way that was of no value to the town of Burlington. And so here we are today, nearly 3 years later, and the buildings are done. They look beautiful, and I think everybody in town would like to see you start bringing some tenants in there. And I understand that signage is absolutely crucial to the success of your development there. And I am standing by my my word that I have given on this matter to allow that to proceed. With that, Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Michael. So I really can't add much more to that because me and Mike were sitting on the subcommittee, and I was on the board back in that time frame when this came about. You'd call me, we had sent out emails to different boards in town. One person got back to us, no one else ever got back to us. So now we're at the 11th hour, and we're getting back to us today with a bunch of emails that are sitting right here in front of me that really don't like the sign. So at this point, I know there's people that want to speak about it. It's not a public hearing. I don't have to let anybody speak. But I'm going to ask a couple people. Sonia, could you get up, please?
Thank you, Mr.
It's because you're on the 3A subcommittee when it started. You were chairman. I'm giving you the respect of those positions to talk to us about your feelings.
I appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, Sonia Rollins, by way of introduction, a former member of the Board of Selectmen from 2004 to 2010. In that time, I served as chairman of the 3A subcommittee and the Town Center Overlay. I presently serve as a town meeting member and, in interest of full disclosure, chairman of the board of directors for the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. I truly appreciate your time, and I do want to talk to you. I think you all know my stance on it, and gentlemen, I know I've spoken to the applicants as well, so I do just want to add a piece. As I told you all before, it is critical for me to publicly state what the vision of the Town Center Committee was, and to publicly state that the vision was never directory signs along the 3A corridor. That is not a surprise to any of you of what I'm saying, because I know I've said this multiple times to each of you. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you letting me say that out loud today. You know, Selectman Runyon, I agree with you that the Building 19 site was dilapidated at best, and it certainly looks a lot better now. But what I struggle with, sir, is that the vision of the town center, it continues to go, and as we know, town centers take multiple years to come together. What we have always said is that signage was going to be a critical component of it. I absolutely agree that businesses need signage of some sort. What we have never really seen as a vision there was a directory sign. It is a directory sign that makes me very uneasy on Cambridge Street. It does not fall within the vision of the town center. Now, the dilemma, I believe, for this board is that you are in uncharted territories. I understand that it's a public way. I understand the town council has said that. I understand that you have talked to people in the past about it. But given something, having it be within your right doesn't necessarily make it right for the peace. And of course, if the board in its infinite wisdom decides to move forward with it, it is important for me as a town meeting member, but more importantly as a town center committee member, that we go on record as saying it was never the vision of the town center to do that. I would ask you to just consider that there are other businesses in this community who would give their left arm to be able to stand before you and get a directory sign in front of their plaza. And they would give any opportunity to even just put any type of signage outside. I would just ask this board to remember that we should be keeping everything at parallel play. We do not want to be opening things, and while you absolutely have a right to lease the land, as a member of this board, you have a right to vote for the lease part. I just ask you to let it go through its proper channels of commentary for the signage itself. Any other sign that was put within the town center overlay came before the 3A subcommittee and discussed it, and we did not have purview over it at that time. The ZBA was the only one who could discuss signage, but we were able to at least put comments forward as a design, as a review. Did it fit the criteria? And I know that that was critical to us. It wasn't anything binding, but it was very important to be able to hear comments from people who either worked within the town center or worked within the ZBA, and we would send those comments along. So again, in your infinite wisdom, I'd ask you to consider that as you go before for a vote. I would ask you to consider that we're trying to be equal to whatever other businesses are doing. I'm very grateful for what's been happening in the town center, but I'm also very leery in saying to you that I could not sleep, quite frankly, because you know I get crazy about this stuff. I could not sleep if I did not publicly state that that directory sign is too large for what the town center envisioned. We've always talked about monument-type signs. We have never talked about directory signs. The underlying zoning at the Building 19 site was BG. The overlay district allowed for multi-use, but never did the directory sign come into play. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sonia. Here's Barbara.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me a moment to speak. I won't take up much of your time. I know you have an agenda and you're running behind for a wonderful reason. I appear tonight. My name is Barbara LaRue, and I am the chairman of the Planning Board. As you all know, the Planning Board sent a couple of letters about this matter to the Board of Selectmen. Pardon me? Oh, I thought you said something. On June 24th and on July 29th. I'm not going to read them to you, but I want to read a small excerpt because I think it's important for the public to know where the Planning Board stands on this matter. The Planning Board is deeply concerned about the precedent that would be set if a private entity is allowed to install commercial signage on town land. There are many businesses in town that would benefit from signage placed on town property, and once this precedent is set, it will be difficult for the town to deny other commercial signs in similar situations. This could result in numerous signs on town property. One could imagine businesses even requesting signage on our town common or parks. Thus, it is with grave concern that the Planning Board respectfully requests that the Board of Selectmen does not allow the installation of commercial signage on this or any other piece of town property. So that is the statement from the Planning Board, which I know all of you have read, but I thought it was important to make sure that the public also heard it. And my question for you tonight is, if you approve this request, is it the position of this board that they will entertain other requests to put signage on town property?
Chairman, may I just respond to that?
I'm going to answer it real quick. See what happens when it comes in front of us.
No, is the answer that I'm giving
Your
you.
answer, okay.
And I think the uniqueness of this property precludes us from having to accept applications for signage on the town common. So to me, it's not apples and apples.
It will not preclude people from asking. You know that.
Asking, yeah.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yes.
I agree with Bob, in my opinion, no, because to me, that this stretch of land isn't a park or a common. So this is very unique. So as far as anybody ever trying to put anything on the common or in a park, to me, that's a no.
I meant any town-owned property.
I was just using the examples you mentioned,
Yes, I
but
understand. Okay.
at this point, no.
It's just something I hope that all of you will consider, because if this goes through, there will be other businesses making similar requests, and you'll need to deal with them. So, thank you.
Okay. Gentlemen, at this point, you want to go? Take a motion?
Well, let me,
Keep talking.
if I can, just for a moment.
Sure.
And now over the course of the last several months, I've heard from a number of people who were suggesting that allowing this sign would give this developer an unfair advantage over other businesses in the community. And my response to that is that denying this applicant is not the answer to our sign problems here. The problem we have in Burlington is that there has been no revisions to our sign bylaws since their inception in the 70s. If it is such an advantage to have this type of signage to be successful in Burlington, then why aren't we doing whatever we can to address the sign bylaws that we have currently? So by denying this is not solving anything. The real matter needs to be taken up by Sherry's committee and town meeting and address the bylaws that are, you know, some 50 years old. In this day and age, business needs to move forward, and I want every single business in this community to be successful, particularly along Cambridge Street. And I am hoping that if the shops at Marshall Simons are successful, that it will have a trickle-down effect to the real mom-and-pop stores down there in the center of town. The guy that repairs shoes, Paula's Coffee Shop, the little pizza store down there. These are all local people with small businesses, and we keep hearing that they would give their left arm to have a sign out on Cambridge Street instead of half a dozen little breadboards, and why don't we do it? That's all I have to say.
Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't entirely disagree with you, Selectman Runyon. I think that we have to give 3A a fair shot, and we are in a unique position. You know, we always tout in Burlington that, you know, our forefathers, the people who came before us, had enough foresight to, you know, keep as much of the business over in the Middlesex Turnpike area as humanly possible. But of course, 3A is a big stretch of land that, you know, has a lot of businesses on it. I understand that. I think that, you know, in this unique position, either denying this or giving the ZBA the opportunity to handle it would then, I know we should have been doing it already, right? It's been 40 years since they were initially accepted, so why haven't we done anything? And I'm sure because half of us are volunteers and we're all busy, I get it. But, you know, we need to take that opportunity to revise all of our sign bylaws and get it in check. I'm sure, you know, you guys are sick of hearing me say this, but, you know, I often refer to Lexington Center as an example that I pick because it's so specific. No sign is allowed in Lexington Center unless it meets a very specific criteria. And if that's what we want for 3A, if that's what we want for the center of our town, then we have to give it a fair shot. And the folks who come in to develop the area should also be cognizant of that. I know it's tricky, and I'm not trying to step on toes, but, you know, at the very least, you know, and I'll say it again, I think that the ZBA should be handling this. This is, I know several of you have been on the ZBA before in the past, and you have a history and understanding, but, you know, after seeing what everyone has said, I would feel more comfortable having a board who handles this on the regular until such time as the bylaws are adjusted. Thank you.
Jim, you had something else you want to add? I see you. I didn't know if you were waving or you wanted to be spoken to, whatever.
If there is a motion to approve this, I actually want to condition it, but I don't know if to kind of, I know the ZBA offered their opinion as to what they'd like to see. I've asked if it can be lowered. I've been told it can't.
Well, we did.
No, I understand, no, they, from 16 to 14, but the letter they sent asked if it could be, they listed 3 conditions. They've lowered it 2 feet.
I saw that request when it was at 16, and we brought that to them.
So it's been lowered 2 feet, but I'm afraid of this going through without certain conditions. In my own opinion, my thought is, I definitely want to condition it that there be no logos That doesn't sit with any of the town center thoughts, from my understanding. And then, again, I'd like to see the stores in the back, excluding the anchor tenant signs, the stores that don't have Cambridge Street frontage, Cambridge Street signs, have them have priority as far as the signs go. I'm just afraid it's gonna go through without any conditions, but I'd like to see at least those conditions put on it if someone makes a motion to approve. That's all I have right now.
Sherry?
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't actually going to speak, but since my name was
Really didn't
mentioned.
think you were gonna, then you blew my mind when you put your hand up. Like she's coming
No, it
at
was
me.
not up until after my name was mentioned. Anyway, as chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, and since that committee was mentioned, and we're mentioning about reviewing the signage bylaws, I thought I'd take a brief second to state that this Zoning Bylaw Review Committee has been in existence just over a year. And we are getting our feet into all of the different zoning aspects, and signage is something that we are reviewing. You are also aware it is also obviously in the general bylaws, so it will take a couple of committees to look into this, and it is our task to do that. In the meantime, personally, my own opinion, and I did write a letter to you folks, stating that you have a process in place, the town has a process in place, and I appreciate the folks, the members here who want to use that process that's in place for a sign that is requested that does not meet the signage bylaws. And that is my personal opinion as one member of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, that I would appreciate that consideration, that to use the processes in place for such a request. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, so,
Mr. Chairman, a quick question, if I may.
yes.
Do we take this in two votes? Do we vote for, if we're gonna say yes or no to actually, like, placing it, and then vote the condition separately, or is it all one?
I believe it would be all one with the condition of if they agree to any of the conditions that come up. So we're gonna vote on the sign itself as going on, and then if Jimmy has conditions that he wants to put on, and they agree to the conditions, then it would be all one vote, right?
Yep, and then you just need to authorize the chair to enter into a license agreement as well.
Right.
So,
Exactly. So, at this point, yes, sir.
To that comment very quickly, do we then get a look at that agreement, or do we just leave it up to you to come to an agreement time-wise, financial questions?
we can update it based upon any conditions that the board may approve, and then recirculate it through the board.
Okay, so you heard a couple things. You heard what Mr. Teague is looking for. Is there possibilities of this, it's off the top of your head, or do we continue this and go to another subcommittee meeting? Or do we just
comments
vote on
about-
it right now?
Are you asking about the questions as to whether no logos on the sign, as well as the tenants in the rear having priority?
Right, yes.
I think we could work with the first condition, which is no logos on the signs. But I'd prefer that, you allow us in the, it works its way through lease negotiations, and there's a lot involved with where tenants get placed on the signage. As you may have noticed, there's different sizes as well. So that could get a little complicated, and I'd prefer not to have that condition imposed on us if we could work with that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, go right ahead.
I know what Mr. Priest said, ZBA should be the one to address this. ZBA did send us 3 recommendations. Smaller sign, it's lowered by 2 feet. They also said no logos. I agree. And they also said prioritize the ones that don't have a sign on Cambridge Street. I'm kind of gonna be a stickler with this, in that, in fairness, the businesses in the back, you could theoretically have a business along Cambridge Street that will have two signs out front, and then a business in the back won't have any signs out front. So I'm gonna ask that we just mirror the conditions that the ZBA, other than, it's been lowered 2 feet, so we'll just call that one a wash, but that we condition it as the ZBA requested. No logos, and that the tenants without street signs along Cambridge Street be given priority. The ones that don't have the Cambridge Street frontage or Cambridge Street sign be given priority over the ones that already do have a sign. In fairness to the tenant, your tenants. It's just the way I look at it. So I'm gonna mirror their recommendations on my conditions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
when they're negotiating a lease, the folks who are leasing the larger spaces are entitled to a larger piece of
Yeah.
the
Oh,
sign.
I did say originally, I did say excluding anchor stores.
I don't want to, at the 11th hour, get into telling them who can have who can be where. I think now we're really getting into the minutia of micromanaging how, how he rents his space and so forth. I mean, I think through compromise, after speaking with members of ZBA, we went back to them and they agreed to reduce the height of the sign. Tonight, they've told us that they're agreeable to the logos. I think having us dictate who goes where on their sign is unreasonable for us to impose those kind of conditions on them.
If I could make a suggestion through the chair to perhaps address Mr. Tigges' concern. Speaking to Mr. Duffy, the intention is that each tenant in the rear is going to have a signage presence on here. The question would be, where exactly on there it might be. So to Mr. Runyon's point, there may be a tenant that, might have higher billing, so to speak, but we can commit that every tenant in the rear would.
Well, that was the goal, I think. That's I'd like to see that. I think that was the goal. I don't want to speak for the ZBA, but I would think they wanted to make sure that the tenants in the back were treated fairly, that's all.
Right.
And if they're going to have signage, if you're telling us that you're going to guarantee that the tenants that aren't along Cambridge Street are going to have signs on this, then I'm okay with that. Because I'm just thinking in fairness of the businesses in the back. They're not going to have any exposure.
Oh, I understand that, and that's part of why we're here, is there won't be any businesses in the back building unless they have exposure.
Okay, so
we're.
that wasn't made clear that they were definitely going to have their name on this sign, so.
Apologize for that, but that is the intent.
Okay, so at this point, I've heard a lot tonight already from both sides of the argument, whatever you want to call this. We're never going to be Lexington. I don't care what you say. Our streets are too wide, they're too far apart. Mr. Murray's never going to tear down his buildings and move them forward. Not going to happen. We're talking reality here. We're talking about reality. Do I think this sign is the best sign in the world? It's better than the 3rd Ave sign, I can tell you that, in my opinion. So this is what we get down to. We get down to opinions. The 3A subcommittee is an opinion. It's what they think this town should look like. Not everybody agrees with everybody else's opinion in this world. So there's got to be people that drive by that sign and think wow, that's fantastic. That's a really nice looking sign. There's got to be other people who drive by the sign and say, that's disgusting. Why did they allow that to happen? How could that Board of Selectmen let that happen? So at this point, I'd like to just move along and get to a point where we're either going to vote on this or to continue it to another meeting, if there's more to talk about. I personally don't think there's more to talk about. Mr. Runyon couldn't be any more right about some of the things he said. I do agree with some of the things Mr. Priest said. Not all of them, but some of them. So at this point, how long, we could sit here for another 2 hours talking about this issue. You know what I mean? And like I said, 5 months from now, half the people aren't even going to know what happened. You're like, oh yeah, there's that sign, I don't like it. Oh, I do. It's a personal opinion. Me personally, you guys are paying 66% of our tax rate. Put the sign up. Enjoy it. Make sure you love it. That's my personal opinion. But I'm here to represent the town of Burlington. I've told you before, I told you straight up, Mr. Kevin, that You are in this town, you're building this piece of property, and for all I know, you could sell it in 5 years, and you don't live here. We have to live here. I've said that to you. We're still here. So this is a matter of an opinion thing, and we could sit here all night long and talk about it. So at this point, if somebody would like to make a motion to approve this with the conditions, or not the conditions, I'd just like to move along. That's just my opinion as chair.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm always the one to speak up for safety. I think safety is an issue. I don't want to see people looking to their left or to their right to find a store. Yeah, people are phone savvy, but not everyone's phone savvy. So in the interest of safety, with respect to people looking forward and not to the left and right, I'm going to make a motion that we approve this with the condition that the sign not contain any logos, but it can contain numbers and lettering only.
You okay with that? Okay, now do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
For discussion, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are we saying it's 12, 14, or 16?
Well, 14.
All right.
14 feet. It's on the lease. It's on the lease. Okay. So,
License.
license. On the license, sorry. I get it right yet? All right, so, made a motion and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against?
No.
3 yeses and 2 noes.
Mr. Chairman, can I get another vote from
Yes,
the
you
board to authorize the chair to finish off the license agreement with the updated conditions?
Gentlemen?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So all those in favor of the chair making the license motion?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0-0. Congratulations.
Appreciate your time.
Congratulations.
Appreciate all your time, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino. Next on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask you if you'd be willing to take the next one out of order.
Sure.
I know you have some folks waiting in the back.
Okay.
Mr. Buckley?
Which one is this?
Which one is it?
Which one is this, Paul?
288.
288. We'll skip over
Oh, it's only
287 and
article.
come back to that one.
Yep, okay. Fantastic.
I know that Mr. Buckley is billing Scott by the hour, and he wasn't anticipating all those fire promotions, so we could take him out of order and help Scott out a little bit here.
Very much appreciated.
For the record, that's not correct. I'm billing 2 other clients, so I'm splitting myself. For the record, Robert Buckley, Raymond Bronstein, to my left, Scott Weiss from Gutierrez Company. I'm going to give a brief overview of what we're trying to do here. We've been working with the planning board and their staff on something that I think is very important to the town. They started about a year ago where they went through town meeting and changed or tried to encourage life science as the future wave for Burlington. Burlington's always been very proactive in trying to anticipate where things are going and to try to lead. As I said at the planning board, and Scott could comment on this, but if you look at what's happening in the commercial real estate market right now, you're not seeing a lot of pure office built. You're having some changes in retail. You have a lot of office in town that is available in terms of being able to be retrofitted for other office, but it can't capture, it can't be converted to grab the next big thing in commercial real estate, which is life science. In the materials that I submitted to you tonight for your review, there are some very interesting statistics, which is it's the fastest growing industry in Massachusetts, and in the greater Boston area is perhaps the epicenter in the world for life science. The amount of money that's invested in life sciences is phenomenal. So once they're here, they're not leaving. And the other thing that is critical is that They actually diversify your tax base so that you're not dependent on one form of taxation, be it retail or commercial real estate. So you diversify. So one is up, and it's always been Burlington's strength in terms of being able to plan effectively. So we've been working with the planning board and tried to identify 3 sites that would be very attractive to this industry. As you know, Burlington was recently designated with a platinum designation by the Massachusetts Biotech Council, is it? And so there's a lot of focus on Burlington. And I know I got in trouble with one of the subcommittees by making the statement that if you look at, in the materials, you'll see it, a lot of the life science industries are just around Burlington. You do have a number of them here, but they tend to cluster, and there's a lot of clustering that's occurring outside of the perimeters of the Burlington proper. But they're using the Burlington amenities to attract those tenants to those locations. So what we're trying to do is to capitalize on what's attractive about Burlington, to try to anticipate and grab and solidify the next wave of development to preserve the tax base, the diversity, and the opportunities that Burlington has always provided. We do not have uses at this point. What the planning board has done is taken your IH zoning district and pretty much made it very similar to the IG district, except they've dropped the height. There's no need to build a building like the one I'm in anymore in Burlington. So they've dropped it to 90 feet with some adjustment if there's parking under, not the 155, which I think was previously. And they've done some creativity in terms of bringing the sidelines and the setbacks into line with the IG. The advantage that going to the IH is that you're allowed to do structured parking. And structured parking is critical for these tenants or users because they'll pay for it. It's a very expensive proposition in this part of the country to do structured parking, but it's demanded by their tenants, by their employees who work there. And if you deal with these companies long enough, you find out that the biggest asset they have are their employees. They want to keep their employees happy. So what we're trying to do is position Burlington to be as competitive as any other community around, and working very closely with the planning board in doing so. I think it's a creative approach. I think it's, I know that the phone has been ringing in my office with potential users that want to come in and take advantage of this. And then I'll be quiet, but one big statistic that I think is really critical, and it's in the materials, is that there are users in the marketplace today that are looking for about 1.2 million square feet of life science space. So there's a demand out there. As they migrate out of Kendall Square and they look at communities that are, I call it the 128 belt. But what's also important is that they want to be up and running within a year. So in order to do that, you've got to be, I hate to use the expression, shovel ready. So you want to have it as of right. That doesn't mean that they can just go in and pull a building permit. You have to go through the regulatory process, site plan review. And anyone who's ever gone through the planning board or other boards in this town on that, that's not an easy process. But it does allow them to say that this is a community that they understand what we do, we could do it, and we've been working with the Board of Health to make sure that the regulations are in place, that they have supervisory jurisdiction. And with that, I'm going to shut up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that the Reader's Digest version?
I tried to put a lot in there.
I almost drove home and came back. Scott, do you have anything to say?
I will just add that as one of the 3 property owners involved there, we're really excited about the opportunity. We obviously were very involved in bringing Millport to the town as a major life science presence here. And to echo what Bob said in terms of the diversification of the tax base of the industry that we have represented in town, we have a lot of room for growth in the life science area, and there's a lot of growth occurring throughout eastern Massachusetts, again, centered on Kendall Square in Cambridge. So it would be great to take advantage of this. The town's done great work through the planning department, the planning board, with the changes last year to create more of a friendly life science zoning district, to now have more properties that can take advantage of this and participate and be available for potential tenants, I think would be a great thing. We see it as a great thing, not only for us, but for the community at large.
Fantastic.
And one quick thing, we've been working with Sherry Stoll? The zoning bylaw review committee we've been before, the land use, the board of health, so there's been a
planning board.
and planning board, of course. But it's been a cooperative effort to try to get to where we are.
That it?
That's it.
Sure.
Positive.
Gentlemen. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, zoning articles as like signage, we don't have a lot of experience in that area, and so out of fear of finding ourselves in an additional uncomfortable position, where are you in terms of votes from the other boards you mentioned?
Board of, Mr. Runyon, you're correct. I mean, we're just here to advise you as the chief executives of the town. We just think it's important that we tell you what's going on, but we recognize in this process your responsibilities. But the planning board on all three of them, or four of them, the changes to the dimensionals as well as the three proposals for rezoning have voted 5 unanimously.
Okay, they have, okay.
I believe, I don't have the vote from the ZBRC, unanimous from the ZBRC. There's a question whether the land use actually did vote, so we're gonna go back there on Wednesday.
Okay, I was looking at this at the angle of economic development, and as you know, we recently hired an economic development person, and certainly we've all been very excited since Millerport Sigma came to town. In terms of economic development for the town, nothing other than that, I would support these articles at town meeting if that's what you're looking for from this board.
So I think from this board, it's just more of an update of what's going on. There's no vote on this, right?
If it was the pleasure of the board, I think Mike summed it up well. You don't typically take positions on the zoning aspects of articles, but certainly from an economic development standpoint, if the board thought that this was a good idea, we could certainly, you could certainly put it to a vote from that aspect to it.
Okay. So I'll just go real quick. I usually don't go first or second, I usually go last, but, you know, myself and Jimmy were up at the Life Science up in Millerport, and it's a phenomenal site. If you haven't been there, you should try to get up there to see it. And the way they do things up there is so different than an average office building. It's, people are coming in and out at different times of the day, the night. There's less traffic. I think for the town, it's a great idea, and especially up in that corridor up there where you got the highway right there, you can run off, and I think it would be good for us as far as the town goes.
Well, just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, you'd be in a room that's twice this size, and there'd be 1 or 2 people in it, so.
Yeah. So is the board's wish to vote on this? Would you guys wish to vote?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd also like to, support this, I guess, because I've heard it's referred to as Cambridge with parking. I don't know if you've heard that yet, but people have told me that we're Cambridge with parking, but I like the idea of structured parking because, one, the people aren't out in the elements going to their car, and 2, the car's protected. If we ever have snow this winter, they don't have to worry about cleaning out their car.
Hopefully we won't, but.
I mean, I'll take the 70s though, I will take those. But I like the idea of that structured parking because it does protect people, the cars, from the elements. And like Joe said, we've seen the life sciences, and it is an amazing, future for us.
I would just add, when you have a chance, there's just 2 graphs there in terms of job creation over the last few years and what the average salary is of people working there and the value of these buildings. It's phenomenal growth.
So my question is, gentlemen, would you like to vote on this and give it their approval for town meeting? I'm definitely in favor of it.
I would say yes if somebody wanted to make a motion to support this.
Someone like to make a motion to support this article?
I will do just that, Mr. Chairman.
That's 4 articles. Do them
Thank
as a
you.
group.
Do them as a group?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen support articles, zoning articles 2, 3, 4, and 5 for January's town meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to support the articles for January town meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against, abstained, 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One comment. I have to say, and not on this, I have to say, the beginning tonight, when you made those appointments, it's one of the nicest public meetings I've been to in a long time.
Oh, okay, then you can talk.
That was really nice to see.
That's, you know
Was-
what,
wasn't it?
Bob, that's, we've talked about this, you know, that's the part of this job that I think I speak for all of us when I say this is what we enjoy most.
Yeah, well, you don't have the advantage. I'm sitting back there and I'm looking at the faces of the children, of the appointees, their spouses or significant others, and just to hear the comments in the audience, it really was it really was a nice tribute to the town.
That's
And I thought you handled it very well by stepping aside and letting them have those pictures taken with, so.
We were going to photobomb a couple of them, but we decided not to.
Yeah, we had a lot of practice
Well,
recently.
thank you for the indulgence. You should be recognized when you do that, because it is good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right.
Good night, Chairman.
Have a great night, guys. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to item 287, financial guidelines. Back in early December, we began the process of preparing for the fiscal 2021 budget by discussing guidelines with members of the school committee, Ways and Means, and town administration. Special thank you to Selectman Hogan for representing the board at those 2 early morning gatherings. We had a presentation from John Denizio, which illustrated the town's current financial situation and set out some scenarios over the next 5 years. We continue to be in a very strong financial condition, but we're cautious about our local economy moving into the future. We're very thankful for the exceptional funding that the town provides us, and we want to be able to continue to sustain the exceptional levels of service that we have provided to our residents over the years. To that end, we feel that an operating budget guideline of 3% is the most sustainable over the long term for the town. We had met extensively with the school administration leading up to the guideline setting, and we made great strides in understanding the pressures and relating to each other's budgets. This upcoming year, the school department has unsettled teachers' contract, and that was the cause of a lot of uncertainty for the school department. As a result of that, we felt it would be appropriate as a starting point for the discussions to recommend a 3.25% operating budget guideline. And that is, guidelines are a negotiation if nothing else. And we had a rigorous discussion at those meetings. And ultimately, after we received input from all the parties there, we settled on a 3.5% operating budget guideline, which is a blended rate between the town and the schools. This is the same operating guideline that we operated under for this fiscal year. And the general consensus of that meeting was we could do that for another year without having a detrimental impact on the town's long-term financial future. That said, I think it's been said before, but a good compromise is when all the parties sort of walk away a little bit unsatisfied, and I think that that's a good summary of what the results of that meeting were. Everybody was a little bit unsatisfied, so that I think we got to a reasonable accommodation, a reasonable agreement. So what we're asking for is a vote for the board to affirm the guideline of 3.5% operating budget blended between the town and schools. I'm happy to answer any questions. John is here, and Bob participated in all those meetings, so happy to provide any level of detail that you would wish.
Thank you, sir. So, gentlemen, do we have questions, or we just got to go right to, it's kind of etched in stones, really, unless we'd like to bring Mr. Denizio down and have him sit up front and talk to us and tell us how great things are in town. Would you like to elaborate on that, Mr. Denizio?
If I could also, while he's making his way down, Mr. Chairman, this process of the school committee and the selectmen and Ways and Means getting together has been very successful over at least the last 10 years that I've been on the board, as far as coming to a consensus on what a good blended number would be, knowing that there are differences between the town side and the school side. And yes, I think there is a consensus that all of us left a little bit dissatisfied, but overall understanding that that was what we needed to do, because there are no budget stands alone each year without affecting what's coming down the road if we start to get unrealistic about what we want and need. So I think we kind of did that on this discussion. John?
Thank you. John, do you have anything to add to this?
As usual, I'm here just to look pretty, and as usual, Mr. Sagrio.
And may I say you're doing a great job.
Introducing, so I don't have anything else.
Well, I just want to point out to the board, it's not really clearly spelled out as to who decides what the budget's going to be next year. So we have this process, it's a negotiation, but I think it sure as heck beats the alternative of the administration bringing a budget to town meeting, Ways and Means bringing a different budget to town meeting, and the school department bringing a different budget to town meeting. So we all get in a room and we try to iron out our differences as best we can and try to at least come up with a consolidated format so we're all working towards the same goal as we work towards the budget. Town meeting, as you know, is a long and difficult process, the one in May, so I think it would only be 5 times as difficult if everybody was going in on a different page as to what the levels of spending were going to be for next year. So, like I said, as Bob pointed out, and we've said it beat a dead horse here, but, we're all a little bit disappointed with the way it worked out for different reasons, but at the end of the day, I feel as though we came up with something reasonable that the town could live with for the next fiscal year.
Okay, gentlemen, would you like to make a motion on this, or would you like to discuss? Oh, I was looking that way, my bad.
I know.
Michael, would you like to say
And I
anything?
deliberately positioned myself here so I wouldn't be hidden when I was way down there, you couldn't see me.
I shouldn't be turning my back on anybody, I'm sorry.
I just, if, allow me a minute.
Absolutely,
With,
take two.
the town administrator. This 3.5–4% is something that, going back now 3 town administrators, that we've always seemed to start to. You mentioned earlier that you believe that this is a budget that should not have a detrimental effect for at least 1 more year. So what are you saying? What do you see beyond that? Is there something on the horizon we should be keeping an eye on, or?
Well, I think historically, the board's position has been to limit the increases on the operating budgets, and, other parties feel as though they don't get enough of the operating budget increase a year, so that's the negotiation we're referring to. I think to John and I would have preferred sort of a little bit of a lower guideline. We're conservative by nature. We're both coming from an accounting background, so, that's built into us. And again, like I said, we heard some pretty passionate and eloquent recommendations made by the other parties as well as to what they would like to see in the budget as well. So it's a negotiation for sure.
Yeah. What do you see, what are surrounding communities, what kind of numbers are they using when they set their budget?
It varies from town to town, but I can tell you that from my standpoint, the town provides all of our departments with exceptional funding levels. So I think if everybody was honest with you, they'd tell you that we're very well funded. We're able to have the resources to provide the services that the residents desire.
Let me just say, and you guys are probably getting tired of listening to me tonight. I saw an interview you did with Phil Gallagher on BCAT, and it was interesting to me that you pointed out the amount of free cash some other communities have that are actually in excess of ours, but yet who seem to sort of struggle in the annual budgeting process.
Well, I think every community runs its numbers a little bit different. So I think I said that in response. I think Mr. Gallagher's contention was that we had too much free cash and we were overtaxing the citizens. I think I view it another way. I'm happy. I'm not unhappy with the amount of free cash that we had at the end of the year. I think it was the highest in the town's history. But certainly, I think John will be happy to point out that Woburn has 28 million or something along those lines. So the way we have a system in place, it's very conservative. It generally results in positive financial end of the year. But every town's a little bit different. Some towns don't have a stabilization fund. They keep all their reserves in free cash. Some towns purposely trying to generate free cash for a specific purpose in the future. So I'm very comfortable with where our number sits. I think I could certainly make the argument that given the big scope, the board is well aware we have obligations for the future with OPEB. We have a pension obligation for our employees. And we have a capital want list or need list, you know, probably $300 or $400 million. So I think when you look at all those future liabilities added up, I think that you would probably agree with me that 13 million is not bad, but it's certainly not too much money to have.
Okay, I found, I thought the interview was interesting, so I just thought I'd give it a plug here tonight, in case people watching us may not have been tuned in to BCAT. For your interview with Mr. Gallagher, so thank you for that time, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Anybody else? No. Okay, so we need a approval on this?
Yes, please.
A motion?
Give us the numbers again, Paul.
It's a 3.5% blended operating budget increase between the town and the school.
That's the motion.
That's the motion. Is a second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against, opposed, 5-0-0, Betty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
All right, hang in there.
moving along.
Okay, next up, we're looking to solicit a board vote on individual warrant articles for the January town meeting. I think we can give a brief synopsis, and you can determine whether or not you want to take a position on these articles. So,
So Paul, we do what we usually do, just go down the list, and if someone wants to hold one, we'll hold it, and then if, we'll talk about it afterwards.
that'd be perfectly
That'd be
fine,
all right?
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right,
So you've already taken care of 2 through 5 with the last, with Mr. Buckley was here. So starting on Article 6, which is a simple school matter. I don't know.
Anybody want to hold that? No? Okay.
Article 7, an auction fund that was put forth by Mr. Gallagher. The general idea behind that one is, given the town's problem in attracting snowplow operators, Mr. Gallagher has suggested that we can utilize these funds set aside to go to an auction to purchase additional snow removal equipment. Some communities do this by going to government surplus auctions, and I know that Mr. Sanchez, when he was in Arlington, they had a massive piece of military equipment that they used, I forget how many wheels it had or what it was called, but it was a pretty impressive piece of equipment. We think it's an interesting idea put forth by Mr. Gallagher, and we're willing to explore that to see if it is something that could bear fruit. But I think the general idea, given the shortage of contractors out there, is that going forward, we're going to have to probably purchase more equipment and then either hire snowplow operators or come up with a way where some of our other employees can plow for us when they're not on regular duty. But we're interested in exploring all options as we go forward. That's basically a summary of that article. It was put in by Mr. Gallagher for $50,000, and thought process being that you can't go to an auction without having cash in hand. So we'll work through the details of that with him.
Anybody? Questions? I'll ask them now.
Mr. Chairman, Paul, just so that I understand, this is just me. $50,000 so that the town can buy equipment so that we can then hire contractors to run the equipment or find someone to run the equipment?
Yes, I think generally speaking, and talking to Mr. Sanchez, we may have to look to more having people hired to ride our equipment as employees.
Okay.
And again, I'm not sure what we can get for 50 grand, but I think it's a genuine idea that,
Yep.
you know, we should look into, and we're willing to look into it. We're not sure if it will bear any fruit. We're not sure if that sum of money, we could buy anything substantial, but it's, again, I think moving forward, we're gonna have to look at things differently as the contractors to remove the snow just aren't available anymore.
Right, okay, thank you.
Chairman, a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sagarino, the 50,000 is that for equipment only, or is that for equipment and personnel?
This is for equipment. The comments on personnel were my own. So we basically, everybody at Public Works and Rec Maintenance is on a piece of equipment now. So if we were able to have more equipment, we would need more employees that were capable of driving that equipment, whether they're part-time snowplow operators or, again, I think there's some prohibitions against current town employees plowing for the town, looking into why that law is and possibly changing it. But we're interested in pursuing all different options in the future. And again, this idea was generated from a citizen, Mr. Gallagher.
Just to follow up? Would it be more like contract employees, because we'd only need them during the snow, as opposed to part-time?
I'm not sure, like I say, this
Uncharted territory.
Yeah, this came to us, and again, I feel as though that if we were able to get some more equipment, the point I'm trying to make is, we don't currently have any more people to drive the equipment, so we would have to come up with some manner of hiring folks to actually utilize that equipment.
Okay.
What's the dollar figure for that? budget?
They put in $50,000.
Okay. Any more? We'll go to number 8.
Number 8, John, you want to give a quick synopsis on this one?
Sure. For number 8, we've spent the last year sort of reviewing our structure of our finance team, which included a review from the Department of Revenue, which was shared with the board back in spring. So come this past fall, we had a perfect opportunity to maybe take some action on what we think might be a better structure when our purchasing agent, Kate Moskis, left for another job. What's been happening since then was the accounting office has been handling the purchasing, and Whitney Haskell in particular has been handling the chief procurement officer stuff. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to move a function that is in the wrong office to begin with. It doesn't belong in the town administrator's office. I think that was probably where the room was, or where the first job that person was going to handle was. So the idea here is for us to, so we have a position in that office, which would be Kate's vacant position. What we're trying to do is beef up our procurement process by having it more integrated with budget and accounting. So what would happen is we would take that job that Kate was in, move it down to 2 levels on the salary scale. We would take the budget analyst job that Whitney's in, move it up 2 rungs on the scale, sort of a cost-neutral change. It wouldn't be adding any bodies, it wouldn't be adding any costs, but what it would do is fix a glitch in the structure to now have our purchasing process be a little bit more professional and efficient and effective.
Thank you, John.
It was also a recommendation in the DOR, Department of Revenue financial review that was done for the town.
Okay. Any questions, gentlemen? Okay, number 9.
Number 9 is an article submitted by a town meeting member, Millie Nash.
Number 10.
Generally speaking, she's looking to do a study of traffic and various things of that nature, and essentially the town's transportation systems, buses, school buses, local transportation.
She gonna head this committee? Or is this all coming from us?
Well, in talking to Public Works, we don't feel as though we have the resources in-house to complete the scope of this study, but we're willing to hear what town meeting has to say on it, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, great, thank you. Gentlemen, any questions on that?
Well, we just completed a Tri-Town study a year ago. Is there a dollar figure on this one?
$1,000.
$1,000.
Is that sufficient?
Not even close.
Okay.
We'll let town meeting debate that one, but,
All right.
okay, I'm with you next.
Paul? That 10, right?
Yep, number 10, you want to take this one, Joe?
Sure. In Springtown meeting in May of 2018, there was a water stabilization fund that was created, and the purpose of that fund was to have a place to capture increased water revenues as we go to enter into the MWRA agreement and eventually be taking water from MWRA. We want to start capturing those revenues now as they incrementally increase over time, so that it's not one big, I think there was a 10-year plan that was instituted on rate changes. So this is our mechanism so what happens if someone pays their bill the way they always do? That goes into water receipts, closes to free cash. We transfer the money from free cash into the stabilization fund in January. Come May, we transfer it out of the stabilization fund to fund the next year's water operations. So it may look familiar, we did this last January also.
Thank you, John. Anybody?
Not on that, no.
Okay, number 15.
11. 11.
Nice try.
Jumping the shark.
Listen, I gave it an F, okay?
11 is a standard article we've had every year. We start out the town Ways and Means Reserve Fund with $200,000, and once free cash is certified in January, we typically supplement that with $100,000. So that article's been in every January since I've been here at the town.
Gentlemen, anything? 12.
Number 12, Burlington Historical Museum. We're looking at providing handicapped accessibility to that facility. It's a well-used facility. All the school children go on a field trip there every year. And we've been told that the ramps are outdated, and we're looking to update the building so that we can provide accessibility to anyone who wishes to come to the museum.
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question on that. Have anybody talked to the Disabilities Access Commission? Because I know they have money set aside for certain projects.
Yes, we have. They've been involved in this. They're willing to contribute with it on some level once we decide sort of what path we want to go down. We've reviewed a couple of different alternatives from a ramp out front versus, and the decision was made to, the best decision would be to build an enclosed lift on the side of the building. It wouldn't ruin the aesthetics of the front of the building, and where it would be enclosed, it would maintain the life of the equipment that goes in there. We applied for a grant with the state for this purpose, and unfortunately, we were denied on that one, so we have tried that. We've had offers from, I think, the Rotary Club to participate in it, and also we sat down with Chris Hannafin, and I think on some level that they would be willing to participate in it as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Logistical question. I assume it's going on if you're facing the building, the right side?
If you're facing the building from the front, it would be back right, so that a van could pull into that. There's a parking space back there that we could make, and they could go right onto, there's a little mini porch there. It would be built right in that area.
Okay, so any other improvements that would be needed around that area, this $120,000 includes that as well?
Well, anything that would make it accessible for persons with a disability.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, next up is Article 13. The board previously, in town meeting previously voted this to resolve a situation on Mooney Road. There was something that was left out of that vote, and we're going back to town meeting to make a correction to that. I don't know all the specifics, but it's been reviewed by legal, and I think the last vote accomplished about 80% of the task of what was trying to be done, and there was one part that was left out of it. That's my understanding of that one.
Okay. Gentlemen, any questions? Okay, 14.
Article 14, this is an interesting one. A person went to sell their home in November, and during the title search, it came up that the town owned their property, which is it's really not funny, because there were two families impacted over this. There were, they do the title search only a few days before closing. So there was people ready to sell, people ready to buy, both Burlington families. And what we found out when we went through the paperwork trail was that 20-some odd years ago, when the town created the Marion Conservation Land, that there was some additional parcels included in the legal paperwork there. Folks have been living there for years, paying taxes, and was surprised to learn that they didn't technically own the house anymore. So again, it's a pretty unique situation. Town council's reviewed it all with the folks, and essentially, my understanding of what this article is that the town will basically be deeding the property back to the owners so that they can go through with their original sale. So unique for sure.
Wow. Hey, sure we have a million questions, but we don't know where to start.
I have one.
No, you don't. No, go ahead.
Are there any legal ramifications in terms of them paying taxes for the past X number of years on property they didn't own?
Well, they did own it, technically. I mean, they were living in it, they occupied it. It was a paperwork issue at the Registry of Deeds that they wouldn't become aware of until they were trying to sell it. So,
Okay.
That-
Well, boy. Yeah.
Okay.
And Article 15, from my understanding, is just additional work needed to the bylaws to finish off the town's transition from an elected treasurer-collector to an appointed treasurer-collector. Right, Betty?
Right, yes.
Right, you don't have to vote on that one unless you want to.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, ready? You want to have a vote on this? Get all information? A motion?
Chairman, I'll make a motion, we approve Articles 6 through 15 as presented by the town administrator.
Motion made by Jim, second by
I'll second.
Nick. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0-0, Betty. Okay, 290, approval of minutes, right? Betty, you want to do them both at once, or would you like to separate them?
Yes, unless you have an issue with either one.
Anybody have an issue with either one of these? November 18th, December 16th? Minutes? No? Have a motion?
Chairman, I make a motion, we approve minutes from November 18th, 2019 meeting and December 16th, 2019 meeting.
Motion by Jim, second by Nick. All those in favor?
Aye. What happened?
All right, subcommittee reports. We'll start with Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it known by all that this board has proclaimed that tomorrow, Tuesday, January 14th, is Aaron Rippon Day. I had the great pleasure, once again, of attending the Eagle Scout ceremony here in Burlington. And this year's recipient, there was one, Aaron, actually they had two earlier in 2019. He's the first one in 2020. Aaron Rippon, a really nice young man, and did some outstanding work around town, as you might imagine. I think we're all aware that the Eagle Scout is the highest honor attainable in scouting, and only a small percentage of Eagle Scouts, Scouts worldwide ever attain the Eagle Scout designation. So again, congratulations to Aaron Rippon. He follows his brother. His first name escapes me, but 2 years ago was also an Eagle Scout award recipient. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have a gentleman on the planning board that's an Eagle Scout, actually.
We have.
Mr. Spail.
That's right.
So, okay, we'll move right along. Mr. Tiggs, subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I gave my little story about the fire department earlier, but with regards to the small cells, I was at a safe technology seminar over the weekend. It was attended by about 200 people from all over New England, and I'm sitting there, and the discussion turned to small cells. And the presenter's got a PowerPoint going, and as the next slide came on, it said what our town's doing. Very first item was Burlington, Mass. It said that we are a national model with regards to small cell policies, and that other municipalities are, you know, taking our policy and applying it to their community, but it was just kind of, little sense of pride set in while I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden see our town up there as a national model for this, thing that everybody's gonna be dealing with, so it's just a small cell update.
Very good, Jim.
Thank you for that.
Very good. I wish it said Town of Burlington by Jim Tiggs.
No, Town of Burlington was an effort by many, many people.
But, Mr. Chairman, I would like to give credit to Jimmy because he has taken the lead on this.
Absolutely.
He's doing a fabulous job, and, you know, without his effort, we wouldn't be where we are with this.
Glad we put him on that committee.
We tend to.
I don't think I had a choice.
You didn't. That's why I said,
Make light
put
of
you-
it
put
a
you
little
on.
bit, but he has put in an awful lot of time.
I thought I was being serious, Mike.
Subcommittee, Jim? Mr. Priest,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've been here
way past the
for a
due time
while,
it's supposed to be.
and so I apologize because this isn't going to exactly be easy.
Oh, it's not your fault. I'm gonna talk to Betty about this later.
Yeah, she's a little ambitious.
So, just first off, happy holidays to everybody. Happy New Year. This is our first time back since we all rang in 2020. So,
Crossing it off my list.
right, we all made it. So, first things first. The last time the ISAC met was back in December on the 9th, I believe. They're actually meeting tonight, so obviously I couldn't be in two places at once. So I'll be reporting back on that next time we meet. But what keeps coming up are the recent and repetitive attacks all across the nation in terms of cybersecurity threats, ransomware attacks, data breaches, many of which are happening at the municipal level. And so the committee itself is trying to work very diligently to work toward formulating a plan to how we can even begin to address this as a community. Some of the things that they covered in December were procurement around what IT might need, disaster recovery, heaven forbid something does happen, whether it be an attack or a natural disaster, ensuring that we're compliant both by mass standards as well as FBI standards, and then governance in terms of, our IT department's scope of power, what they're in charge of, how that is doled out, basically making sure that there's checks and balances to everything, and that there's a system in place so that we're prepared. So I believe they're giving their report at January town meeting, where we'll get to hear the full scoop. I know one of the big things for the committee was to develop an actual plan that could be actually put forth. I know several members of the committee who were on the prior ISAC board back in 2012, 2014, and they recall that the finalized report was very lengthy. It was in excess of 200 pages, and then only a couple things were kind of ticked off that list of recommendations. So they're really trying to create a much more digestible approach to how we can mitigate threats in terms of digital attacks on the community. The only other thing I want to talk about is the Sculpture Park Committee. We met as a committee with the Historic Commission last week. I believe it was Tuesday morning. And from the last time that we met in December to now, we've learned some very interesting things about the land as it pertains to the space next to Grandview Farms. In the legal documentation that outlines how the swap worked and how the land is to be used, that parcel of land, Area 1 we've been calling it, has been designated for passive recreation only. We are not, actually, did town council ever get back to us on that? No. So we had asked town council what their definition of passive recreation was. One of the biggest things that stood out to everyone who read Mass General Law around passive recreation was that no structures could be placed there, permanent structures. the gray area becomes, you know, if an art installation doesn't require a base of any kind, does it still constitute as a permanent structure? So that conversation kind of took place. Historical Commission, not big fans of sculptures going on that space. They would much rather, you know,
Wagon wheels?
any part of, any relic or artifact that they themselves have, they would rather see it restored and placed there. But the problem that they have is that their items would need to be placed under a shed. And so they run up against the same problem that we do. And then just to complicate things, our contact through the New England Sculpture Park Committee that's helping us kind of coordinate the call for pieces, so that there may be some confusion around the necessity of defining location in the call, which was done when the call was put out, and now may need to change. We as a board said that we were comfortable with testing this space. We as a board also retain the right to continue on that path. The discussion turned to a much more collaborative path forward with the Historical Commission. And so I didn't know the best way to approach how we want to move forward as a board. I know the subcommittee report isn't the best place to do it, so we can move it to new business or talk about it next time we meet. Timing is tricky. You know, do we maintain the location as is and, you know, mark it as temporary until this whole thing is sussed out? Do we, you know, move it to a different location? You know, I don't know. So that's kind of where that all netted out. It was a fun meeting for sure. I completely get and respect what the Historical Commission was saying. I don't know in terms of timing if it makes sense for us to try and pick a secondary location. It wouldn't hurt. But I don't know how we as a board would want to proceed in light of all that fun information.
I will volunteer to work with you on that and maybe prepare a presentation to the board.
That'd be great. There we go. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll make sure I go on a committee, help out, prepare something. Yep. Okay. All right, Chairman's report. Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Sorry. It's always one of us, it's always something.
That's all I got. It's all good. No, I really don't have a chairman's report. Mr. Sagarino, have anything?
I just have a quick one, Mr. Chairman. Today I had the opportunity to go over to the senior center. District Attorney Marion Ryan was there speaking to our seniors about how not to be victimized in many of the scams that go around. It was very interesting subject matter, and there's a big crowd up there, so I just wanted to thank her. I know that Chief Kent has let me know that the DA is always there for the town when we call her, so I'd just like to say thank you to her to come and speak to the seniors, and you know, I learned a lot, and I plan to use some of what I learned, you know, to help some of the seniors that I'm aware of, so it's great presentation.
At this point, do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved.
No, let's just sit around for a while.
Okay, let's stick around. So motion made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion adjourned.